Hey there boys and girls, my name's Kyle, better known on YouTube as Blinkcraft, and today I'm doing a bit of a dev blog. It's actually last week's blog, but it took a while to figure out what I want to do for an intro, and after watching a bunch of different kind of vlogs, I wanted to figure out what type of style I actually wanted to do. And to be honest, it's been kind of snowing like a motherfucker here in Michigan, and I've been showing up to the office super late every day, which means I'm getting home late every day, and I have to cut out something for my schedule, so I really didn't do that much this week, so I figured I'll skip this week, maybe do a little bit of 3D modeling, and I'll just do this for last week. So without any more rambling, let's jump into Tuesday. I started out by building a particle system because I was finding that within the map, when I was doing all the tiles at once and showing them all, I was getting some pretty abysmal frame rates. It was probably about 10 to 15 frames a second at best, and that's no bueno. So I decided to limit how many tiles I show on the screen at once, but because I had to limit it so close, you could actually see the tiles popping in and out, and it looked pretty shitty. So to help hide it, I tried to build a particle system, but it didn't work out too well. Basically, it was just a circle. It was creating a basic cube object, and it was just having that cube start out as nothing, or a zero size, and scale up to a full 5 Unity units, and they're just kind of floating off in the distance, and it would just despawn eventually. Now, there's a couple reasons why this system doesn't work the best. First off, I couldn't pre-warm the particles because of a Unity 5 bug, which means they started off as soon as the game started up, and you could still see the edge of the map. The second thing was that the clouds were moving with the camera. That's because I associated them with the camera, they were locked to it. And even though I did eventually lerp between them and it kind of just made them slowly follow the camera, it still looked pretty crappy because clouds aren't going to move like that. You want to do like a fog of war system where you move through the clouds, not the clouds move with you. And I couldn't figure out a way to get the particles to despawn when the camera was too close to them, at least within the particle system. So what I decided to do is to generate a cloud map. So I just generate a massive square of clouds, and they're just 5x5x5 cubes with a little bit of a cloud texture to them. And then when the camera gets too close to them, I use the same script that I'm using to hide the tiles that are too far away. I'm just using that in the inverse of that to show the clouds if they're too far away and hide them if they're too close. On Thursday, I realized that the clouds are kind of shitty and they're a little too small, so I made them much larger and added a little bit of an offset to them so they're not super packed together. I raised them a little bit off the ground to give them a slight shadow over the world, and I actually started to work on some of the basic map generation. At this point, all it does is generate one prefab, which was just my planes prefab, and it's just kind of generating that a few times, and I was able to eventually generate an entire world size based off of that one prefab, and I can just adjust how many tiles I show for the X and Y through the script. On Saturday, I decided to stream, and my goal was to generate the entire map. However, we did run into a few issues. I originally wanted to do this through a JSON object. It was going to be an array of JSON objects, and the reason why I chose JSON object is because I'm pretty familiar with JavaScript since I use it every day, so I thought it would be pretty easy to implement. I figured out pretty quickly that C# and JavaScript seem to have some sort of blood feud within Unity, and they don't really like to work together too well. So I wasn't able to get them working, so I thought, okay, maybe I can just make a couple public functions, and then the functions will just return what I want. So I could have a get prefab function, and then I call that function, give it the array index, and it would just grab that prefab from the index number and pass it back. But it turns out they just don't work together at all. A lot of people in the chat were helping me out, trying to figure out maybe I could use some XML, or maybe if I could serialize some JSON objects from a different script and bring it in and try to do some weird serialization stuff, and I just didn't feel like doing any of that. So in the end, what I decided to do is I created a list of game objects, and then I created an array where I actually built the map, and then I just inject that array into the list, and then I just loop through that list and pull out the prefabs. Now, the reason why this kind of sucks is because I actually wanted to use the JSON objects because I can attach multiple properties to it. So I could give it a game prefab or a game object. I could assign a height to it if I want to change the Y value of where things spawn. And maybe down the line, if I have to add any other properties to my map, I could individually assign those to each tile. However, now I have to generate a new list, and I have to maintain multiple lists. It's kind of messy the way it is, but if I really want to, I suppose I could bring them over into their own public class and then just set up some type of public function that then just passes out that list, and I can pull them in because it is taking up a decent amount of space within my script. Once we're done with the map generation, we move on to Sunday. I basically just move the water plane over a little bit so that it actually fills up the lake and the river. I decided that the clouds were too static and it just didn't feel right. So I gave them a little bit of a wiggle so they kind of just bounce between a couple different sizes, and just a little bit of movement off in the distance really makes the game feel much more juicy. Everything just kind of feels alive and real. However, I was noticing that once I was covering the entire map in clouds, I was getting another dip in performance. So what I decided to do is use this same script that I was using to hide the distance of the map, and I modified it just a little bit so that I could give that to the clouds so that they're showing when they're in the mid-range. If a cloud is too far away from the camera, it doesn't show. And if a cloud is too close to the camera, it doesn't show. I found this to be a pretty decent balance between performance and visuals. I then went through and modified some of the post-processing effects, adjusting the lighting, the tone mapping, and I also limited the camera so you can't dip down too far into the clouds. Overall, I think it was a pretty productive week, pretty happy with what I have, and as long as I can get some of my 3D modeling done, I might actually be on par to having this project mostly completed for Chapter 3 of my D&D campaign by January 1st of 2018. Hopefully everything goes as planned, but you always got to prepare for the worst. As always, if you have any tutorial suggestions or questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. My name is Kyle, and I'll see you next time.